welcome to this panel, which I
This,
definitely know the
yes,
name of. It is the Creating
it's
Characters
creating
Backstories.
creating character backstories. Yes, welcome to Saturday of the Tabletop Squadron Con. We're the only ones who have Saturdays anymore. It's just us.
hmm
hmm
No one else gets them.
We have taken the rights to Saturday.
Time is just behaving weird. I don't know.
If you're experienced Saturday, you owe us 50 cents.
Fry says hello again.
Hi,
Hi,
Fry.
Fry.
What a good
He's
cat.
very happy he gets to be in my lap.
He really looks happy,
Aww.
yeah.
Oh,
He he is a very happy cat when he is happy. Sometimes he just gets very confused about the food, and he's not sure how to deal with that.
oh, hey, Solicitor. Hey, Cole. I haven't talked to y'all in forever.
Hello.
It's been so long.
But yes, this is the Creating Character Backstories panel. How do the various ways to create character backstories and the various ways you can apply it to your games. Who wants to go first with their ideas on creating character backstories? Was that a dog? Did Robin want to go?
No, that was
No,
me.
that was Nick.
Oh, that
That's
was
my
Nick.
thinking
Oh,
noise.
it sounded like a dog bark in the distance.
Yeah, I have two main ways that I do characters for like home games or fun games. I'll start with one of them, probably the one that's less is better advice, which is I like to pick a trope and see how I can play into it as much as possible. So, you can see this in a lot of the NPCs in our show. So I will be like, you know what this show needs to meet like a Casablanca style detective character. That's what this show needs. And that's where you get Nito. But or leaning into I think there should be an action hero or um what if I just make a character that's just Gaston and just using that as an archetype and then trying to fit it into a setting can be really interesting to do because like putting Rambo into Star Wars ended up with someone obsessed with living trees. So things get a little out of hand over time. But that is one of the ways I enjoy
Is your
making
hair doing
characters.
okay, Hudson?
I'm having problems. There was like a strand that was really bothering me.
We do have hair gel and hairspray if you ever need those.
Hair products, no. My hair's already thinning. I don't need to pollute it with products. I don't know.
Polluted.
I don't know.
I don't know if that's
I
how
don't know if
that
that's
works.
yeah. I don't know if
But
that's how it works either. I'm not a hair expert, but I will see my stylist eventually, and we'll have a talk.
oh,
Oh, bye, Fry.
also, you can buy your own "Give Me That Hot Hot Jizz" coffee mug on our TeePublic store. Look at it. It's
Oh,
beautiful. Don't you love? I mean, because the best part of waking up is hot jizz in your cup.
don't say. Oh, you said it.
It makes me
Said it.
uncomfortable every time. Even though I know it's coming.
Lilith just looks so smug having
I
said it and
just
modeled the mug.
You forgot the
it's
most
so
important.
awful. It's an awful mug, but I love it. You can also get it on T-shirts. You can get it
Face
on a face
masks.
mask now because TeePublic deigned to give us that option without telling us. I mean, maybe there was an email somewhere, but they just activated it one day, and now we have face masks. So
Mm.
So
get yours.
you didn't say the most important part. If we sell 60,000 of them, Nick gets a new car.
I mean, Nick is a big boy and he can buy his own car. But
But
if I somehow sell 60,000 of these mugs, or any of the mugs, if I sell 60,000 mugs, I'm buying Nick a car. And I get to decide what kind of car that is. And it will be a fully decked out 70s van.
I mean, honestly, when it is time for me to get a new car, we may just have to hire you on as a consultant anyway, Lilith.
Yes.
Cameron's doing the laugh of someone who is not entirely sure whether I'm joking or not. I'm not joking.
I mean, you can also buy any of our other designs as a mug. You can still buy the limited edition Tabletop Squadron virtual convention one as a mug. Or, I mean, it's only mugs. I don't care if people buy the shirts. It's just mugs. That's what it is. 60,000 mugs.
Mug's good.
Help us get to this ridiculous goal. Thank you.
We don't even have 60,000 downloads.
The travel cups do go to the mug fund.
Mug fund.
I will count those.
They are
Okay.
in the mug category.
Yes.
Now back to creating them characters.
Nicholas, what's the other way you create characters?
Oh, am I doing both in a row? Okay. So the other one, which is the one that I usually do for the characters I really like, is I will flip through also probably don't follow the way I make characters. They're generally bad, but I will flip through the rules and the archetypes, the classes, whatever the fun toolkits you get from a character, the playbooks, if it's Apocalypse Engine, and find the one thing that I like. For Star Wars, the first time I did it, it was, oh, hey, dual wielding just doubles your damage if you're good enough. It, and with that one, it was, oh, hey, Brawn informs both health and melee damage and soak. Seems like if you just really lean into that, you could make a character that does a lot of stuff. But like other examples would be, hey, you can get a magic bear. That seems fun. And then I will build the whole character around that one thing, and then it informs a lot of other decisions. So like for instance, for my dual wielding character, it was like, okay, so I want to really abuse this brawn mechanic, which again was not great. This is not a great example. Oh, my banana fell over. But so the character needed to be a droid because I could make the most into bronze. Like, okay, so if it's a droid that's really strong, what does that mean? It's sort of like world building, but with just one person. Or if you are a character who has a boosted nature score so that their magic bear is really strong or fun, then you can be like, okay, but why does this character like this magical bear? And why do they know nature? And you start to build out from there. So finding one thing to grab onto and then flesh out kind of backwards from that is a fun way to make an interesting and engaging character.
Oh, there's the banana. Yeah, you're pointing it out.
I'll put
Also,
it back.
abuse this brawn mechanic is like what you say in bed. So just
Well,
Hi.
abusing brawny is what you do afterwards when you're cleaning up.
uh
I'm
So
kind of
how
upset I
does
said that.
picking out one specific mechanic affect how you create the backstory for that character?
So the backstory, like I said, informing kind of where that character came from. So uh, why is that one specific mechanic? It kind of works like a writer's prompt. So why is that specific mechanic or that specific feature or whatever thing you latch onto uh, important? And why do you want to play off it? You can also do that, like with in Star Wars, for instance, if you're looking through Wikipedia and you find an alien race that's particularly interesting, you're like, I really want to explore this. And then the backstory you could say, okay, so if I'm really interested in this weird four-armed spider bug stick alien thing, what do we know about where they come from? Can I work some of those facts in? Do they want to be really involved with the culture or not involved with the culture? The backstory you can key off of the thing that you want to highlight, which is, hey, this alien was in a the pod racing in episode 1, and I think they look neat. But like you could take that little detail and spin backwards to find an origin story, if you will.
Great. How do you apply that to games?
How do I apply it to games?
How do you apply that to your play? How do you decide when to bring stuff in that backstory into the session? What is your thought process on that?
So I'm pretty light as a player. I'm pretty light on pulling backstory in too fast because I think that a certain amount of character backstory can be determined by how the character plays in the present. Um, and usually that doesn't always survive all the way through the first couple of sessions. I think a lot of characters' personalities are kind of formed by the group as well. I really enjoy in games giving some details or fun side characters or things to the GM. As a GM, I love getting it because that's a fun thing to work into the story. Um, And then when I'm the player, I promptly forget about it because I want to be as surprised as my character is. We played a game of 7C one time that Cameron ran, and I decided my character had like 7 sisters or something, or 5 sisters, a lot of sisters.
It was a lot of sisters.
Yeah, a lot of siblings. But like that didn't come up till like 10 sessions in, and I was like over it. So when one of them showed up and was really mean to my character that everybody else was usually mean to and became really popular with them, like that's a fun dynamic to explore. Um, but kind of ceding some of that control a little bit as a backstory for a character to your GM to like give them permission of like, hey, here's some ammunition, fire that when you feel like it, can be really fun and make the game feel really personalized. And as a GM, I like to do that too. Although I try not to like steal stuff or use it the wrong way. Because you don't want to, like, for that sister thing, like it's fun for your sibling to show up and give you a hard time. It's not necessarily fun for your sibling to show up and decide they hate you and try to kill you without having talked through that kind of thing first. So you want to make sure that your players have uh, some efficacy on their own backstory. So if when in doubt, check. It would be my advice for that.
Cool. Um, I had a thought. Man, did I lose it? I think I can get it back. Come
I
on.
believe in you. You could do it.
Meha, meha.
We can go to Cameron while you
Yeah,
while you
go to
think.
Cameron
Do you need
if you
to
have anything.
ponder?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Well,
Okay.
Cameron, same questions. How do you create the
See, but
backstory?
she got practice. She was ready.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah,
create
I
backstories?
also knew
How do
what
you
this
apply
panel
it?
was about, though.
Yeah.
So I would kind of was prepared, Nicholas.
Theoretically, I do. I got distracted.
So for my characters, I tend to like the first thing I normally pick is their like class. So like for Karma, I knew I wanted to play a bounty hunter. Um, in some of the like in the 7th Sea campaign, I played it. I knew I wanted to be a member of the Die Kreutzer because I wanted to be in a secret society. So like I flip through the books and find which class I think would be the most fun and entertaining. And then once I've determined that, start building the rest of the character off of that. I tend to do a lot of my like backstory building on long car trips with Nick. Just talking through things like um in most of the campaigns I've played like a young 20 something like ingenue character or an elf who looked that age. And with Karma, I was like, okay, I want to play a slightly like more mature character because I tend to end up taking the responsible role in the party anyway. Um, so it's like it doesn't. I want to play an older character. Having kids would be fun. I have twins. Um, and a lot of the character stuff that I'm thinking about tends to come from song lyrics, which is weird.
I need an example.
Karma's name is Karma because of Karma Chameleon, and she has a red headband because it's red, gold, and green. So she's green, and she has a red headband, and she has gold bangles. Uh, there you
Nice.
go. That's how I came up with my character description.
But so you start characters based on an idea of how you want the character itself to be like from a in-universe personality standpoint. And Nick, you tend to start with a mechanic.
Yeah, I'm more on the mechanical side. Because if I do the story-based side, I have like I can't focus on one thing. It's like, oh, I want to do this and this and this and this. So I find the mechanics a helpful grounding point for a backstory and what the character's about, and things like that.
And both are valid.
And then there's
And then
me.
Cameron, well, we'll get
Let's finish Cameron though. Let's finish Cameron.
Cameron has to tell us how she applies that into gaming.
So the amount of backstory I create for my characters varies depending on games. In the Edge of the Empire campaign that Lilith ran, I had like a 4-page written up history of my character, complete with photos, which was it was a lot. But for like, I tend to like to bring the backstory in through conversations with the other characters, with also providing info to the game master that isn't necessarily going to come up in a casual conversation that I'm having with the other characters. But
Nick, I'm going to do something just for you.
yay!
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
So like Nick knows a fair amount about karma that hasn't come up in conversations with Tink and Ziana yet, because it's like, it's not weird stuff, but it's just like stuff that you don't necessarily bring up in casual conversation. So he can throw those in whenever he feels like it, if he needs something to mix stuff up. But I tend to like to slowly bring things in to help define the character once I figure out how they fit with the other players.
Not to throw you completely under the bus with this, but also speaking of like the GM talking with players about their backstory, some of the backstory stuff that hasn't come up is because you're not sure how you want to approach it yet, and you're still kind of noodling. Some of Carva's stuff is stressful, so
It stresses me out, and I don't want her to be stressed, but then I'm stressed, but then yeah.
hey, there's a whole panel about bleed
Oh, is
later.
character bleed coming up?
Yeah, that might be
Weird.
worth.
Yes,
That might be worth.
5:30. Yeah, 5:30 Central.
That might be worth attending, Cameron, because you and Karma have a lot of bleed, I think.
Yes.
But that's the thing that I try to be respectful of, because as a storyteller, throwing Cameron and Karma into that would be great. But as a spouse, not, and as a GM, not a cool thing to do.
All right, Hudson, have you collected your thoughts?
I've collected my thoughts, I believe. So basically, I don't get. Here's how I do it, and I'm not saying this is how to do it, so I want to make that
So
clear.
we're just going over the various ways you can, because there's really no one correct way to create a character and their backstory. So your way may also be valid.
So this way is not valid. But
May also be valid.
Yeah. Okay. So here's one way that I do it. I don't. That's one. Like basically, basically, I go in and I kind of just make the story up as I go, and that's not the right way to do it though. And I've learned after multiple tabletop sessions with groups that that's not the way to go. You shouldn't do that.
Well,
Now
you can,
you can,
if that
but
is okay with the group, that you don't have any backstory whatsoever. And especially for casual games, you don't always need a super strict backstory. Just do the things you want to do. It's okay to occasionally retcon character information as needed. For example, Ziana's height got retconned a little bit at some point. Ziana's height was originally listed as 5'6", but then we decided that it was a lot better if she was short, because we just always referenced her being short. So we decided that she was 5'6" in her wedged boots. So she's much shorter naturally.
yep.
But that is how we kind of retconned that to make sense.
I think that I had a pretty significant shift in how I played Tink in the first few episodes, and especially the prologue, and how Tink is today. Specifically, like, I think I had him be a lot more moody. I think I actually name drop libertarianism as his primary trait at one point, if I
I don't
recall.
know if that actually made it into the episode, but when we were talking, you definitely were like,
I was like,
he's a hardcore libertarian. I was like, Okay, here
Yeah,
we
yeah.
go.
I forgot if that made it to the prologue, but like, there's some other things where I just dropped them later because I was like, that I don't really like those traits, or that didn't I couldn't act them out very well. But I have an idea in mind of like, I guess the main point is I think about the personality more than concrete. This is what happened in their life. I have a lot of trouble doing the this is what their family's like, and this is this and this. It's more this is how they act, how they feel, how I will be portraying them. And I generally do the X Factor type characters and campaigns, which is good,
Wild cards.
wild cards, but I do need to branch out a little bit, which I'm going to be trying to do in other stuff. Maybe I don't. I don't know. I think it's good
I
to
mean,
not be one thing the entire time, because then you might, like get boxed in, or other people can't be that type of trope and stuff like that.
that's true, but also you have a very particular set of skills, which is a lot of fun. So
Yeah, and
And
don't
also,
actually,
be down on that.
all of your characters have been an X Factor character in a different way than each other. Like, so you're diverse across the
yeah,
range
the
of wild
Deadlands
cards.
character who was a wild card, we actually had pieces. I think I told Lilith to come up with my backstory for my character in Deadlands and then forgot it, and then never knew about it the entire game, but Lilith and Nick to a certain extent did.
Yeah, that was a thing. That we did a lot of experimental stuff in that game that didn't necessarily work out, and I'm glad it's not recorded, but that part was fun.
Hmm. There's a few questions in chat, unless Lilith, you actually, they said for later though. I don't know when we want to get to them.
I'll
Well,
snag them.
we haven't gotten to ask Lilith
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with
their
Lilith.
backstory things.
So I tend to create characters from sort of a combination of Cameron and Nick. Of sometimes I pick a mechanic that I want to start out from, like, okay, I think this character I want to do sword fighting. But sometimes I'm like, I want this character to be fun and quirky. Like I try to start with like that one little nugget and then build out from there. And I tend to create pretty detailed backstories. And I don't always use the detailed backstories like in the game, but I do build out the backstory to inform how I see the whole character. So, for example, Ziana started as a character for a one shot that afterwards, when Nick was like, oh, well, let's just do a Star Wars podcast, I was like, oh, I think that character is what I want to do for that. And for that one shot, I was like, I want to play a character that's just like fun and kind of like a party girl character. So I started with that and was like, let's be a smuggler. Like that's fun, and started connecting dots and started going through like Star Wars lore and combining that in, and was like, okay, well, let's start at the beginning. What do I think their childhood was like? And then kind of wrote some stuff about that, taking into account like the time period of Star Wars, of like what things were happening in this world while this character was a child. And then like how do I think their teen and young adult years were like? And how do I think these life events would have affected them? So when this character event happens, how do I think the next few years of their life pans out? And then once you kind of have that timeline, you can kind of think like, so how does that make them feel like today? Like what kind of character does that make them? And so for Ziana's backstory, she has a lot of emotional trauma because of like growing up in an active war zone on like on Ryloth, because of like the separatists and then later the Galactic Empire, and all of that backstory leads her to have a lot of issues, but she masks them through the party lifestyle. And so usually she's very flippant, doesn't want to address the emotional stuff at all, and will kind of just push it all to the sidelines and either ignore it or react with jokes. But then every so often you get like a little bit of her actually being sad or doing the whole I don't care about these people, but oh, okay, I guess I'm going to go save them because I definitely don't like them. I don't like them at all, but maybe it would make my life more difficult if I didn't. Because deep down she does care. And so that's kind of how I apply it to gaming, is less specific plot points that I feel like I need to bring in. Like, I don't feel the need to always bring in every single detail as if it's a plot hook, but I write those details so that I can figure out what the character is like and how they act.
And you, when you're doing that, how much you might have answered this and I just wasn't paying close enough attention, but how much do you develop before the game starts versus as you're going through and making the more in-depth backstory?
So I usually have a really fleshed out backstory before I start a session. I tend to write like their life backstory, and I do try to leave sections that aren't completely answered so we can come up with them later on in games. For example, when we started, I decided that Ziana had been arrested a certain number of times in her life, but I only wrote down what a few of those were because I decided that we could find a few along the way, because for that it's funny, because our game leans slightly comical. It would be more funny
What?
to have the openings to be like, oh yes, I have been arrested for that. And just be able to like have that opening to bring that in and be like, yeah, I've done that. And then I can fill that in. And because what Ziana has been arrested for doesn't too much impact the character, because she's been arrested for tons of stuff and does all sorts of illegal things that one time getting arrested for shoplifting isn't going to really change too much. So like if it was shoplifting versus grand theft auto, like those choices don't really affect Ziana because she does both of those anyways. So like it is still fun to leave some open-ended areas, but for me, I like the important stuff to be, or when I say important stuff, I mean like
Formative. Like,
formative things that happen in the character's life, like where your parents are at, where your siblings are at, major things like that. But if I want to leave open like, oh, did this character go to a university? I might leave out exactly which university, but I'll want to know like what their major was, because the major might affect them more than the university. But at the same time, the university might affect them more than what specific degree they got. And so I think for me, it's just easiest to come up with a small, core memories.
From Inside Out.
It's easiest to start with like a small character idea and then start at the beginning and kind of work towards that. But like, I am not going to write an 80,000 word book on this character. I will write like 8 pages in a Word doc, but I'm not going that far.
it's good to have a little bit of flexibility, I think.
Leave yourself some room to play around with.
Hmm.
And like, I think Ziana's personality has definitely changed a little bit over the course of the show. Because we're at over 50 episodes, and it's pretty common for your character to kind of go through some flanderization and becoming like certain characteristics becoming more prominent. And I don't think Ziana was quite as silly at the start of the show, but I think like those character bits were definitely there. So I don't think like I've changed her completely, but I do think I've leaned into certain aspects more than others.
Awesome. So I think we've gone around and all answered similar questions. We can go to questions from the audience unless there's something else we want to talk about.
I'd
Let's
say,
do questions.
Nick, from a GM's perspective, what do you like about character backstories? Like, what info do you like getting from the players to be able to piece in?
Um, as a GM, something that I always find helpful is if there's someone important to characters. I find, wow, you're really excited. I find that they are,
He's really interested in character backstories.
I mean, I would be too, except his is probably kind of a bummer because his name is Batman. Um, but as a GM, I'm more interested in getting people, uh, like characters that I can introduce that already have a relationship, because I find there was some writing advice I got a long time ago that was, if you're not sure where the scene is going to go, have a new character open the door. Which, if you use that the right way, can be really interesting, and you can do that for a story as well. Um, there are other details that are fun. Like, I know there's certain things in each of our show's backstory that I have in my back pocket that when we get to them, like, I really want to dig into. But having significant others, having parents, having friends, having people that we can introduce is a way more interesting way to flesh out their backstory, because then you can do it in character. You can have your friend you haven't seen in a long time be like, hey, remember when we were little and we did this thing, rather than being like, my character stares off into the distance and remembers that time they ate special sandwiches. And like, it's not as interesting. And you could do a mixture of both, but that's something that I really like. The quintessential, I'm a loner and everyone I've ever known has been killed by the main bad guy and all I want is revenge, does not give you a lot to work with as a GM.
No, it
It's
really
much more
doesn't.
it's much more interesting to be like, I'm a loner except for my little sister who's stronger than me, but I don't know where she is. Like, something like that is, you're like, uh well, what does that mean? Like,
Well, because
what can your little sister do?
even like it's always like a loner ranger type character. It's an Aragorn. But like
Which,
even Aragorn still has connections and like a relationship with an elf to like drag out. And it's like, okay, all your family's dead, but you have somebody that we can connect this to and do something with. Because if your character
and
is like,
her
I
dad
hate
doesn't
what,
like you.
and he has, yeah, a grumpy father-in-law. That's character conflict.
Hmm.
I think it comes down to character conflict, because if you have no relationships with anyone and you don't care about anyone, you can't have character conflict. And conflict is kind of what drives stories for the most part. Like you can do some
Agreed.
slice of life stuff without character conflicts, and those can be fun, but that's really hard to keep interesting for like multiple seasons.
Yeah, that's true. And so it does kind of depend on the story you're telling, the kind of campaign you're running, things like that. But even if you're doing a slapstick, high character death kind of game, having something that you can tie into it, it just gives you a lot more levers to pull as a GM. It can be
Ooh,
pretty
in the
good.
chat is there such a thing as too many character relations? I don't think so. I think you can create as many character relations as you want. You're not going to pull every single one of them into the game though,
No,
because
not
there's too much. If you have a list of 70 different characters that you have relationships to in your previous life before like the game start, unless you are the only player and that is the point of the game, is for you to work through all of those relationships, you're just going to bog the game down and you're probably going to end up stealing focus from other players.
It'll be Game of Thrones.
So even Game of Thrones doesn't have that many like important characters to deal with.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
tend to just die in the background, and then you're like, okay, well, that one's done.
Yeah. It would be, and the thing is, like, make as many characters as you want, give those to your GM. I'm sure they'll be happy, but like, don't take it personally if you only ever see a couple of them. Because I'm sure they're all really cool, but it having every NPC can kind of steal the spotlight, which isn't cool. That's actually a really interesting thing about our game, is that like Karma had a trait at the beginning that was like she knows literally every bounty hunter, and that's kind of changed into she knows most bounty hunters, and like uh Ziana has a trait of, oh, I probably got arrested with this person, and that's been like oftentimes that's true, and anybody in the underworld or that is a hacker, Tink knows, but it's still fun to run into characters you don't know. So there are times where it's okay that an NPC that gets brought in isn't super important, or is but doesn't have a deep-seated backstory with somebody already. So
Yeah.
there's a line to walk.
Well, and we had those traits, but I don't think any of us gave you a giant list of these are all of the people we've ever met.
Oh no,
So like
yeah.
even if it came up, it's like, oh well, here's this Herglick. Ziana's been arrested with them before. We're like, okay, let's learn about this Herglick. Who is this Herglick? Because it wasn't a defined character before.
Yeah. So little column A.
I think we had a question a while ago in the
Yes,
chat.
I have been
Yeah.
collecting them over here.
Okay.
Cameron,
Okay.
do you wanna
Uh,
be questioneer since you
sure.
were collecting them?
So Tech Dude TX asks, kind of answered this one with Nyx, but whatever. How do you build backstory into your story? Do you primarily leverage your GM or do you involve other players?
You can involve other players. The hard thing to do with other players, like I used to do this all the time, is my buddy that I played games with, I was like, this character and that character are already friends because I wanted to always be friends with him. But what it can do is kind of alienate you from the rest of the party. Um, if you and your best buddy from a million years ago are always talking about like inside stories or whatever, then like how are you going to build a whole relationship with everybody? So it's something to kind of keep an eye on. You can do that. The counterpoint to that is in like game systems like masks and things, where before the game even starts you have to say, how did you meet everyone in the group and why are they all important to you, because the group itself is what's important. um, and that I actually really like doing that. The tried and true you all meet in a bar hired by a stranger thing is, it exists for a reason, and it's a good way to get started, but coming into it with like we already care about each other or very quickly will, can really tell a different kind of story, which I would advise. So mostly I would say talk to your GM, get your GM involved. As a GM, like involve people's backstories, but careful being like, I already know this character, we have a super long history, but not anybody else, because that makes the dynamic kind of weird.
Yeah, in the most recent D&D campaign that Lilith ran, our party got together before playing and we decided that all of us were friends with one of the characters.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah.
So he was the spoke. So we each had a relationship with him, and then he had gathered us together to be an adventuring party. And so like that worked well because we had some stuff that we could pull on for each other, but it wasn't exclusive.
I think over the years that we've gamed, I think we've done almost every combination. Because like Tabletop Squadron starts with somebody hiring all these strangers together.
Mhm.
But many of our other games have started with you all already know each other. The Star Wars game or the Edge of the Empire game I ran before this, uh, we started with everyone already being on the ship and already knowing each other and having been together for at least a month or two. Some characters had been on the ship for longer, but everyone was already there. And we just kind of discussed what that backstory was like. And was it Cameron's character who had just like appeared
Yes.
Yeah.
and
I
had not
just
actually
showed
been
up,
hired as a pilot, and
and
everyone just
thought
they
everyone
someone
else
else
invited.
did. Yeah.
And I was just there.
Yeah, that was fun.
So it can, and I think we've also done these two characters know each other, these two characters know each other, but all four of them don't know each other. And and then yeah, the D&D one, which really shouldn't have been D&D. That game was not very D&D-esque. Which just goes to show, like, if you want to play something that's not traditional D&D, don't play it on D&D. Like, we really should have used a different system. So like they can all be fun, and I think it depends on where you want your story to start and like what your goal is for the game.
All right. Next question. From that, Agent Sid asks, how do y'all's ability to enact your ideas affect what character concepts you use?
I can say, for me personally, enacting the ideas tends to not affect what character concepts I use. I've had several characters that I tried to do and it didn't work out well, and I ended up with something kind of different because I was like, I'm going to play into this trope, or like, what if I make a build that does this? And it never really worked. Like, I didn't read the rules right, or I was very competent in my character abilities and swung and missed, and we ended up with some really interesting characters. The bard character that we talk about, my original plan was to only talk in Shakespeare quotes. I had a deck of Shakespeare quotes that I was planning on using, and I used like 3 of them in the first session and was like, this is so hard. I can't do this. So he just ended up being like kind of a smarmy jerk instead. That character also turned evil halfway through the campaign because of magic. Like, stuff happens. But I'll usually just go for it and then be okay if I have to kind of improvise later or scrap it. But part of that too is that we're a group that's played together for a long time, and the people we play with not on microphone are usually people we're super duper comfortable with. um, so I feel very comfortable trying something new, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and people know that I'm gonna break some stuff out, and I'm also playing with a group that can say like, hey, this thing you're doing is like not working. What are you trying to do? Let's work on this together a little bit, because it's really collaborative. So that's me. It's not necessarily the best way to approach it, but I don't know.
I mean, for me, if I'm going to do something with the character that I will have to constantly bring up, like a personality trait or an accent or something, the most important thing is to ask yourself, can I do this for 3 to 5 hours at a time for the next year or more, or however long you want that game to be? Like, if you're doing a one shot and you're like, yes, I can do an Australian accent for an hour. Yeah. But can you do an Australian accent for 4 hours for the next year and a half? Then maybe think about like pulling it back or doing something you're more comfortable with. Or, and again, like, if you are okay with your accent not being great and you're like, this accent isn't going to be good and it's definitely going to come in and out, but like, we're having a fun game with friends, that's fine. But like, some of the reason why Ziana's accent is that like really terrible Star Wars French is that's a lot easier to carry through for many, many hours than doing like an actual French accent. Because like, I took French in college for like 2 full years and could conversationally speak it for a little bit and have been to France twice. I do not do an actual French accent. I do something that would make any of my French professors very upset with me. They would be so sad. um, but I don't want to be sad at the end of the day, so uh, I make it kind of a silly accent. And Star Wars has never really understood what a French accent is, so why should I?
Yeah, I think I tend to have like the first few sessions are kind of where a lot of the development happens for stuff, because like you can come into the game with a lot of ideas for this character, and then once you start doing them, you're like, actually, I hate this. I don't. I. It's either it's like it's you chose a voice that's like painful to do, which is bad. Don't hurt yourself. Or once you get together with the rest of the characters, it's not meshing and it's not working well. So like adapting there. But like I think I tend to try to have the stuff that I feel is super important about the character be things that I'm very comfortable dealing with going into it, so that it's not stepping on anyone else, and it's also not something that I'm going to be struggling to keep up with as we go.
These have been great answers. I wish I hadn't
Yeah.
answered this great, but we might just need to go to the next question.
Well, yeah, we can go to the next question.
We can do that.
That is okay.
Tech Dude TX again. Also, if you have characters that don't have good backstories defined, how do you go about defining them?
With the help of
Uh,
my friends.
Yeah, I actually was going to say the same thing. Like, I lean on the rest
Yeah.
of my players. How do you fit into the group? What kind of personality things do you want? You'll notice a lot of my backstory stuff, as Lilith was so kind to point out at the beginning of this panel, have to do with how are they acting right now, and then later being like, why do they do that? But like, fill in with the group, ask players, lean into a bit. If you mention as a joke really early on, like, oh, hey, I have tiny hands, then, and everyone decides that that's a thing, like, you can, that can become a character trait, and you could talk about, like, did they get made fun of when they were little for having small hands, or whatever it is. Like, rely on the group. I some of the most fun we have storytelling and playing RPGs and stuff is doing it collaboratively, and that can apply to your character too.
Yeah. So you can always ask, like, hey, would it be okay with the group if I connect my character to this?
Mhm.
And then just go from there. Like, again, my semi-blank list of Ziana arrests of just like, I think it would be fun if Ziana has been arrested for this already, and just kind of waiting for those hooks that kind of interact with your own, where you're like, hey, I can connect these two dots and tie my backstory in without forcing it in on everyone, just bursting into the room and being like, let me tell you about my sad childhood. I know we're dealing with something else right now, but I want to talk about my childhood. Because that gets old, and you just kind of take away the spotlight from everything else onto your own character. And that's bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it ends up happening through conversations in character and decisions you make in the moment. It's like, hey, we're going to the fall. Has anyone been here before? Yes, I have actually. Apparently, I went there once, and like, then you're like, okay, apparently I went to the fall. At what point? Why was I at the fall? Doing things like that in character to fill out that backstory.
Bridge those gaps. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is, like, we've been playing together for a very long time, so we're very comfortable just like jumping in and adding things as we go. But there's no reason, like, if you're playing a home game, you're not recording, whatever, or even if you are recording, because editing's a thing, to just stop for a minute and be like, hey, this is a good chance to tie it in. Is anybody interested? What do we think that looks like? Like, just have a conversation about it. No one's going to judge whether you do that in or out of character. And doing it in character is really fun, but if you're not comfortable doing it, you don't have to. Just talk about it. The secret cheat code for tabletop RPGs in general is communication. Talk to
Talking
your
about
players,
it.
talk to your GM. If you have emotions, talk about those. By that I mean, like, emotions being inspired by what you're doing, not just like feelings in general. But well, I mean, talk about feelings. But like, that really is like a way to have a good game, is just talk about it. Be with a group that you're comfortable with and like work on it together. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you will be being like, oh, hey, this thing you just threw out, I think is going to be tied to me, and here's why. And the whole group can do stuff together, which is really cool.
All right. What's our next question?
Pirate Rowan asks, have you ever made a character and halfway through felt like the backstory you chose just doesn't make sense anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a character of mine, the only one that ever got killed off, I was not vibing with. I even forgot the character. I think that's how much I didn't like it. Um,
Oh, your
You're a
paladin that used a
halfling
crossbow.
paladin.
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember
yeah.
that one.
I I don't even remember the details just to say yes, that has happened. And
Hmm.
you can always you have the flexibility in games like this to either change your character, retcon like Lilith was saying, or kill them off, or like have them like retire gracefully and like walk into the
Yeah.
sunset. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so for that character, we tried to see if there was anything we could change about the character, if we could introduce some new character trait that hadn't been discussed before, or some new life event that just hadn't been brought up. But overall, you were not vibing with both the character and the character's backstory, but also the mechanics of the class and everything that you chose.
Hmm.
So because it was all garbage, we threw it out and got you a new character. And you
Yeah.
kind of like that new character a little bit better.
Hmm.
And I think you can't be afraid of that, of it's okay to try new things, but sometimes you're going to try something new and realize that, oh, you don't actually like that. And it might take you a few sessions, and it's okay to either change that character a little bit over time, introduce something new about the character that can make it more fun for you, or if it's just all the way to the core rotten, throw it in the trash compactor, introduce a new character.
Yeah, and you also have the flexibility if you're playing a game, you have the character backstory fully fleshed out. You may have given it to the GM so that they're aware, but you likely didn't sit down the first play session and be like, all right, my character's name is Jules. She was born on a Tuesday, and like read through the entire thing. So if you're going through, most likely the other characters and players don't know the full backstory. So if as you're playing, you're like, actually, I kind of hate what I decided was this character's backstory. I want to play them a different way. Can just remove that, and then just if you give it to the GM, say, hey, I made an update, and pass it on. But likely that's not fully out in the open anyway. So if you like most of the character and you're just like, I enjoy playing them, but I don't like the history that I gave them, just toss it out
Yeah.
and reinvent the backstory.
And you have so much more room in a like personal, like a living room game versus an actual play podcast. Because then you like your I like to call it a living room game of it's just you and the people there who are going to hear about it. So if you do incredibly heavy retconning, it doesn't matter because it's you all. Like you get into a little bit more tricky situation with that once you have an actual story in a podcast and listeners who are now familiar with that story. And
Then you gotta do
sorry,
multiverse theory and that whole deal where it's like, oh wait, we were in a different dimension, so everything that happened didn't really happen.
but it gets a little bit harder to fully like completely retcon something without any sort of good explanation when you have an established story and an audience to it. You can still do it. Like look at comic books. Comic books have been doing it for like 100 years. They just occasionally they're like, this Superman sucks. How the fuck do we get rid of the? Let's just kill this Superman. New Superman in like a year. Let's just do that. We'll just start over. So like,
Quote
don't
of
be
the panel:
yeah.
Lilith says, "This Superman sucks. Let's just kill him."
To be fair, I think most iterations of Superman suck.
Some.
I do not find Superman an interesting character because I don't feel like a lot of authors utilize Superman in the correct way, especially uh, in this sort of gritty post Nolan world of like, characters have to be gritty and sad and emotional. I'm like, no, Superman is good boy. Superman soft, good boy.
This was
Can
funny
be
because I was gonna say me and you arguing about this will be a whole panel, but actually we 100% agree.
yeah.
So
Like I feel like with Superman, the most interesting things you can do is like play off of his humanity and how he is like integrally like a good person and how he deals with difficult situations while being super good. I don't like gritty Superman. That Superman is not gritty. Like, you have Batman for that. And even Batman is not as supposed to be as gritty as some of these other things make him to be. You have Green Arrow. He's gritty. He's a weird man who shoots a bow and arrow and runs around. Oh,
Yeah.
Exactly, Fry.
But like,
Uh,
I don't know. I think we have to get off Superman
Yeah.
and comic book heroes. But
That's yeah, that is like an
I just have
entire
big opinions
convention.
on like how. So Green Arrow, I don't know. Green Arrow has changed a lot. And in some iterations, he's the happy one, but in a lot of them, he's kind of like the more morally ambiguous one. And I feel like he fits that a little bit better than some of the other characters, because I don't like the idea of someone having a rule about no guns, but then being gritty. Like, I feel like someone who makes the rule of no guns should have a good moral compass, at least in some part. Like, he can be super affected by his trauma growing up, but if a character is going to say no guns, no murder, then they should be striving to do good in the world and being a good character from a moral standpoint. And that kind of ties into your backstory.
Hey, there it is.
hey.
There it is. I'm connecting it. Know that your character choices should tie into your backstory and your emotions. So, like, why is this character who is putting so much emphasis on not hurting people super okay now with blowing cars up with people still inside of them because, oh, well, it's not a gun, so that's okay. Like, I don't like that Batman. I like my Batman in underwear on the outside, running around, having weird tension with Eartha Kitt Catwoman. That's the
Yeah.
kind of Batman I like.
That one's
Also,
pretty
I
good.
just like Catwoman. I like Eartha Kitt Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman. I like cats
Thanks for
and women.
thanks
And
thanks
cat women.
good cat women.
Catwoman.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yes.
Yes.
Like a quick
Do
one.
we want to pick one that maybe we haven't covered too much?
Yeah.
Let me look out of the three.
There's how do you handle someone with too many ideas?
Uh,
Shut them down.
oh,
Oh,
Like, I
well,
think
that
we've
would
kind of
have a
covered some of
conversation
these. Yeah.
with your group, communicate, say, look, I feel like I don't get to do much because you're kind of quarterbacking. And then either they say, okay, and they step back and everyone's even again, or they get upset and they leave.
So yeah, one of our games, I had to deal with that. A character or a player wanted their character to have all sorts of powers that weren't in the rule books, and that would be okay, but like everyone else had already created their characters within the confines of the rule book. And so I was like, hey, you can create this character with the ridiculously overpowered anime shadow powers you want them to have, but then everyone else needs to get a chance to get up to that level as well. And he didn't like that. So I was like, okay, well, then let's just modify this into something that fits this setting in the rule book. And like, I'll work with you to do that. And I'll definitely make sure your character has like fun, special powers, but like not just free reign to do whatever you want.
Mhm.
And then when we got into the game, more and more, he would message me after of like, I just feel like my backstory wasn't brought up enough. I was like, we spent a third of the game in a 6-player game dealing with you that session. Like, you actually came up a lot. Like, also, let's remember that the last campaign was also heavily about your character to the point where many other people felt left out. So for this campaign, we're going to pull back on that and give some of the other characters the focus. Like, you're still getting lots of screen time, like, but we need to roll that back to make it fair for everyone else. And that kind of kept being brought up throughout the entire campaign. And every time I'd have to have that conversation with him of like, no, it's not fair to the other players. So I'm not doing that. Like I will bring up like that is equal to everyone else, but you're not getting special privilege here. And that player eventually, after that campaign was done, did not come back for the next campaigns, and that's okay because like you don't have to have every player in your group forever. Sometimes play styles don't mesh, and sometimes people need to just figure out their own stuff before they can play in a group, and that's okay.
And so, yeah, the two things I want to say with that is it's a lot easier to pick who you want to play with for a long time before you get into the habit of doing it. So, my thing I would recommend is play some one shots with people with like no long term obligations, see who can show up, see who you enjoy hanging out with in that regard. Because, like, we have a bunch of friends that we have played with some, and it's just like RPGs aren't really their thing, and that's okay. But it's better to find that out before they feel obligated to show up every week. And then the other thing is conflict resolution stuff. Like it's gonna happen, and it's good to just talk about it like adults. And that can still be really hard. This is from a very anxious person saying that, but like it's important to do. But it also doesn't have to be the GM. I think there's a lot of times where it's like the GM is expected to be the referee, the person who talks to everybody, make sure everything's going good. But like if you as a player are having an issue, like you can talk to the GM to make sure like you understand what's going on, but like other people can have that conversation with the group as well. And doing it as a group can be good. You don't want to like call everybody out in front of it, but like there's different stages to this. Honestly, that's like a whole panel talking about group conflict resolution. Um,
Yeah.
but like, don't feel at if you were the GM, don't feel like the only this is all your fault. You're the only one who can deal with it. There is a group of people, but the main thing would be talk as adults, talk about how it's making you feel, how you feel like it's doing the game, what is it doing for the group. And like Lilith said, if you've given somebody a few tries and like really just made it very clear what the expectations are, and somebody is not down with that, then maybe that's not the game for them, and that's okay.
I would say so. Like that player ended up just not coming back on his own volition, but I had to in a different game a little bit later on fully kick two players out because both of them would not respect me as a person or a GM for that game. We're constantly making things less fun for other people, doing things like playing YouTube videos at full volume while other people were talking occasionally. And you had to be like, hey, my dude, please don't do that right now. Like, we've talked about how that's kind of rude. If you want to show us something, do it. But like, don't just, no questions asked, just start playing this video. And one of them just kept doing some rude stuff, and one of them decided that they like to say certain slurs.
Yep.
And so I had a big talk with both of them. One of them was like, okay, I won't, but then kind of kept that behavior and then was like not asked to come back at a certain point because even though he had fixed some of his behaviors, he had not fixed enough to be allowed back into the game. And one player just rage quit. I like said, hey, stop being so rude. And he was just like, if I can't be however, what was, he said, if I can't act however I want to amongst my friends, then I don't want to play in this game. And just like
Okay.
rage quit and left the groups and like unfriended me on Facebook. And I was just like, oh, okay, then yeah, my dude, you're not in the game anymore. Like, cool. We're never going to ask you to come back either. Like, that's that just shows such a lack of understanding things that I don't want to deal with this anymore. So like I don't care that a few months later you're like, well, he never even actually apologized. He had someone else kind of apologize for him. And communication. No, set limits for yourself.
Mhm.
So
Well, and the thing is like it someone once said no RPG is better than bad RPG. And I
yes,
agree with that. Like if you're going to a game every week and you're spending more time during the week complaining about the game that you're in
that's a
than
bad game.
playing the game or like
Mm-mm.
enjoying it or talking about the good parts, it's probably not worth it, and it's worth
It's
figuring
yeah.
out why and
Mhm.
comparing that with like the people that you're enjoying playing with, and sometimes that might mean, hey, I'm the one that's not fitting with this, thanks, but I'm out, and that's okay. And there's lots of resources and places, and everybody's stuck at home right now anyway, or social things are generally on the down low, even if you're not uh, sequestered for various reasons. But the point being, like, the internet's a thing. You can find people that mesh better with you, and when you find a game and a group of people that have like the same interests as you, it's going to be so good, so much better. And you'll grow with that group, and then maybe at some point that group won't be good for you either, and you can change. Like, that's what it is. Don't feel trapped with a game. And that's why backstories are important.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we got a little off track there.
Brought
Maybe
it back
just a little, but
around.
It's a good thing to talk about, though.
yeah.
So
Join us in 25 minutes for the next panel.
Yes.
yeah.
My friend Christelle and I will be going over Star Wars fashion and various aspects of it, and it'll be a fun time. We have a PowerPoint or we have a slideshow. It'll be great.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
PowerPoint.
real good.
PowerPoint's an old word.
It's still
I guess
around.
PowerPoint's still used pretty well. I'm just so
People
used to
still use
using.
PowerPoint. It's just I
Google
use
Slides.
Google Slides
Yeah.
because I have to always have access to my stuff, whether it's on my computer or phone, because if I don't write it down, I'll forget it.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming to the panel.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Goodbye.
Bye.